regards to the interviews, I'm sure many of you are familiar that within consulting, and especially within Carney, you will have two main parts of the interview. One of them will test on how do you fit culturally, how do you fit in terms of our values, and what can we expect for you to bring to the table on this end. How do you behave in certain situations? So that's the behavioral part of the interview. And the second one will be case interview, in which we will test your ability to solve specific client problems. Can we move? Okay, thanks. I've been wanting that. Okay, so let's start with the behavioral interview. This part you should take, let's say, in a very relaxing manner when you show up. We actually truly want to know and understand who you are. How do you react to different situations? And here we want real-life examples of you demonstrating the behavior and the values that we as a firm are promoting, that we expect from our team members. To put it shortly, one of the key aspects that I'm looking at when conducting a behavioral interview is a coffee test. So if I would like to spend time on a coffee with my colleague, and if I think that we will be working well in that manner, I think you will be a good fit. And the main thing here is to be somebody reliable, who will be there for the team and who we can always count on. With regards to the behavioral interview, you will get like many examples of these questions, and let me maybe share some of the ones that I use very often. For example, we might ask you, what was the last time when you obtained a new skill, and how did it go for you? Or have you ever had a conflict within a team, and how did you solve it? And you should definitely bring genuine parts of the story to this part of the interview, but there's a certain structure to be followed. So what we want you to point us to is, first, what was the scenario? You can say, okay, I was part of this university project team. We were tasked with doing a job of this kind. My role in the team was this and this, and I've had teammates who were supporting me in this manner. So you kind of set up a little bit of a scenario. Then, basically, in this part as well, you have to point us to what the problem was or what the trigger part was. So you can say, okay, we had opposing opinions, or we didn't know how to approach it, but how to approach the problem. And when you set up this context, it becomes very clear for us what has to happen over there. Then in the second portion, you will say what I have done about it. So if my teammates had opposing views, they couldn't streamline the presentation in a certain direction, I maybe took a role of a moderator. I maybe said, okay, let's design a framework in which we will make a decision. Let's maybe play two different roles. I will be the defense advocate and you will be the one giving facts. Just give us a glance into what you took about it. So what did you do about it? And finally, in order to complete the story, we expect you to say, okay, and the impact was this. Meaning, for example, the presentation could have gone in direction A or B, we went in direction A, or we went in direction C, and we delivered the presentation and we scored 9 out of 10. Some KPI, some idea of how your actions impacted the result. Okay, something is going on with this. Okay, so I've already gave you some samples of interview questions. If you want, you can also take a photo of this. For example, I told you, describe a time when you had to lead a team through a difficult challenge, in my example. But you can also say, okay, I had to work with somebody whose personality is different, who has different values than I do. And this kind of questions is something I genuinely believe all of you have stories about, and that's why I'm amplifying once again that you should be following your private examples of these questions, because then you will best depict the framework that I give you. Yes, I don't think this. What? Where? Here. Okay, clear. Good. Okay, so once you're done with the behavioral interview, and let's say if the total interview portion is somehow around 1 hour, behavioral part usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And that's when we delve into the case study interview. That's when we get into somebody what many would call a main portion of our, let's say, interviewing process. So I will just try to give you some main tips plus some specific examples on how it went through some cases when I was interviewing candidates. In terms of case study interview delivery, you first have to understand the situation. Okay, I will be the one, for example, presenting to you the case. Our client is a large pharmaceutical company that deals in these industries, has a history of delivering differentiated products, and this part, one advice, please listen to carefully. What we want from you in this part is to ask some genuine questions, to pinpoint in the specific direction of solving your case, to kind of asking the questions that you think are needed to be clarified in order for you to precisely know what is the problem. Okay? In the second part, we usually expect from you to develop a certain structure. We will show examples of some structure, but on this one, I would advise you not to be template-driven, not to learn the templates by heart, but to have some sort of agile structure that can be adapted for different kinds of interview. Then, once you've set your structure, clearly communicated, you will go into specific analysis, mainly crunching the numbers or analyzing certain categories, and finally you will come to synthesis, meaning recommendation. I love to call this part, you ran into a CEO and you have a 1 minute to give him your recommendation and he doesn't have more time. So this is how you should be thinking about synthesis. Okay, so let's see where we start from. When you get the case, usually I advise you to take notes. We advise you to note down the details. When you're developing a structure, that you write that as well. Because if you have a visual framework in front of you, if you have these kind of details, you will be better able to guide us as interviewers also through your thinking process. And this is, I would say, the essence of the interview, to show us that your thinking process is in line with what client expects of us in the real world. And make sure that you do spend a lot of time practicing. And my advice on this one, okay, there are a lot of resources. Do it to a certain extent. Then work with your friends. Find somebody to practice with, find some peers from the industry, try to get as much practice as possible, get a feedback, then go back to studying, go back to working on the cases, then try again, and I think feel when you're ready to deliver an interview. Okay, with regards to the case structure, I don't want you to learn photos and frameworks like this by heart. I want you to be able to deliver them consistently without thinking I have to cover boxes A, B, C, and D. But here are some pro tips. In the initial phase of the interview, when I say, okay, we have a pharma company that has a differentiated product portfolio, is kind of needs to work on its R&D to drive revenues, you need to be thinking of what is the overarching main issue. Okay, do I need to take the company to the new markets? Do I need to improve its profitability? So you need to identify what is the #1 goal. One of the good questions for the beginning is like, okay, is this the key success metric that I should rate my solution on? Like, is net profit something I should base my decision on. If you can clarify this with the interviewer in the initial part of the interview, I think you're 30 or 40% there, okay? Then you need to decompose this overarching issue. For example, I need to improve profitability in some main sub-issues, A, B, C. Try to keep it short, don't have like 10 sub-issues, have like 2, 3, 4, depending on the case. For example, I need to be thinking of how to boost my revenues, I need to be thinking of the way how to optimize my costs. Within those specific boxes, what we want you to do in the next step is develop a certain hypothesis. For example, if I want to boost my revenues, I can do it through going into new product portfolios, I can do it by going into new markets, examples such as this. So you make an initial hypothesis that you can clearly test. And then usually the interviewer will guide you and say, okay, I want you to test hypothesis number 2 out of these 5 that you pointed out, okay? And then you would come and say, okay, but do I have some supporting data to make my decision? He would give you some assumptions. And that's when you get to this data part. So this is how you expanded main issue, 2 issues, hypothesis for those 2, 3 issues, let's say, and bunch of data. So you've done this. What we want you to do is to get from there to 1-minute recommendation. And how do we do this? So you have like a bunch of analysis and you say, okay, I've done these 2 pieces of analysis. How can I combine those 2 pieces of information in a finding? I can say, okay, maybe my company is not present with products A in geography B. So that's already a synthesis. And that's already like a certain finding that you come with. Conclusion that you derive from those findings is like, okay, maybe the second portion will tell you, in order for me to get into geography A, I need to invest in marketing. So the conclusion for you would be, from there, let's say, yes, I suggest that we invest more in marketing in order to boost the product A into geography B. So that's how you kind of divide, and that's how you develop recommendations. Okay. One guiding key principle that you should always have in mind. I don't want you to be learning things by heart. I want you always to apply some general principles such as this one. We call it MISI, and this is a buzzword. It says mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So things should be separate with no overlaps in meaning, but they should encompass the whole issue. So if we are talking about profitability, revenues minus costs give you profitability. Revenues don't have much to do with the costs in terms of analysis, but when you combine them together, that's fully exhaustive of the profitability boost that you need to achieve. So there's nothing in between those 2 categories. Okay. Yes, this is the slide I was looking for. With regards to the case interviews, you can have different kinds of them. And when you read, for example, certain resources, case in point, it usually divides the books about case prepping into these types of interviews. And it's good for you to do 5 profitability interviews, 3 M&A interviews, interviews about strategic sourcing. It's good for you to know these frameworks because you will understand what you might be faced with and how, in which direction to be thinking about. But please don't limit yourselves to this, okay? Usually what I've done when I was preparing for case interviews, I did like different kinds, but then I tried to find like my own specific structure that's flexible, that I'm able to adapt. Because, for example, I was getting an interview where, I'll give you 2 examples. One very good example of an interview by my colleague was, Carney is opening up a new office. How big an office do we need? So this case, you will not find within these typical categories. And the second one that I was being tasked with in my interview is like, okay, we need you to merge two departments in one company. How would you do it? So expect that 80–90% will come out of these frameworks. A lot of them will be profitability, but be ready to have flexible structure to address atypical interviews. And once again, this is how we develop the analysis structure. I've already took you through it, like what is the overarching issue. In this case, we wanted to help the company X to increase sales, and these sales can go from price increases or volume increases. So you can see these are mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And then there's for example, in this case, we took a different approach. We say how to increase sales per one customer and how to increase number of customers. And here you make hypotheses if there's a potential to increase customer demand, or clients purchasing potential, or customer mix. So you see, like, you're forming hypotheses around these main overarching issues, but I think main part of your mixing approach should be here. So this part should definitely be 100% MISI, of course others as well, but if you do this first part well, I think you're 50–60%. Okay. As I told you, in the final aspect of the case study interview, you need to make a recommendation. So this recommendation, imagine you're delivering to the CEO of a company, okay? And this is some principle that you can follow in order to bring your delivery. You can say, okay, this is the situation. We were looking how to, you asked us how to increase our profitability. The reason for that is that your profitability has been decreasing over this period by this much. You've been tasked, like, asking us, is there any chance to leverage these kinds of opportunities? And I will tell you that you can benefit from marketing and going into geography A, and this will bring this level of result. So this is one way of doing it. Another way also of doing it is to go straight into the point to say, okay, this was the problem, I recommend you do this, this will be the output. And then, if you deliver it quite clearly, top down, then you can go into answering some questions. What analysis have you done? So this part is not where you present, hey, I've done this kind of analysis, these kind of findings were in between. No, you're talking here about big categories, and then if you get extra questions from the CEO, you would answer about hypotheses, about assumptions, and things like this. Okay? And maybe communication style tips on our end would be the following ones. When communicating during the case study interview, please try to use simple language. So this is what we have to deal with on a daily level with our clients. You have your technical buzzwords, we know you come from different backgrounds, from universities, you know the matter, okay? But when you're delivering proposals for a client, you should be very simple, very understandable for anybody with different background to make sure they understand you. Second of all, that they believe you. Also, what you can feel from within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the interview, if somebody is genuinely interested for what they're trying to solve for. And finally, you need to make sure that your communication is purposeful and in line with the topic being discussed in the case. Okay. So this is how you deliver, and now I'm going to tell you more about how we rate you. So what do we grade when we are listening to your proposals, okay? We first want to understand in the initial part of the case interview if you understood the problem well. If you were able to reiterate what is the problem, if you were able to say, okay, I'm tasked with this, and this is what I'm solving for, and this is my key success measure. So this is the first aspect of our grade. Second aspect of our grading is like if your structure is well set to solve this issue that you've identified, okay? And feel free in this part of the interview, please, to take out 1 to 2 minutes to set your structure straight. Don't be afraid of the silence, okay? Say to your interviewer, can I have 1 to 2 minutes to think, and do it in that time. Third of all, we will see what are your analytical skills like, if you calculate well, if you basically combine different pieces of information as well. And finally, we will test if you were able to deliver sound and concise recommendations. So, based on grades, on these 4 elements, we make a decision. Okay, I gave you a bunch of do's and don'ts. Here you can also, I suggest maybe take a photo. I'll just give a couple of them. For example, listen is the main thing for the first part of the interview. In order to understand what the issue is, you need to listen. Maybe later in the interview, when you're delivering recommendations, you need to be confident, okay? Third, if you want to deliver a successful interview, make sure you take the ownership. In Carney especially, we want interviewees to lead the case. It's not, don't expect, for example, me to bring you 4 exhibits. No, you will have the issue, you will say, I'm solving for this, these are my assumptions, this is where I want to go, do you have the supporting data? And then we'll respond to that. So make sure that you take the driver's seat. And maybe some of the don'ts, don't force fit a standard framework, I will repeat this X number of times today. Don't use buzzwords, use simple language. Try to relax, and that's our job also in the behavioral part, to make sure you're relaxed, and we've all been in your shoes. And finally, don't make recommendations just to make recommendations when they make sense. Don't be afraid of the silence, that's one of my pro tips. Okay? And here, we will give you just some of the resources that you may leverage. So, personally, I've, of course, used Carney website. This is where you can find our specific types of interviews examples. Make sure you cover some blueprint books, such as Case in Point. These are like some typical books that will help you with initial understanding of different structures. Don't stick to it 100%. Also, go to portals such as Prep Lounge and find friends around you that are preparing for the cases. If you have like 5 people around you that are preparing, trust me, you will do better when you do mock cases in between each other, and try to find a peer who you already know within Carney and ask them, say, can you give me a test interview? Can you help me understand where I stand? What should I improve? So this is one of the key aspects. And finally, I would say before the interview, take a day or 2 rest. That's my advice, actually. Don't overdo it. And I think I've done this in 25 minutes, if I'm correct. I try to make sure that you have 5 minutes for the questions. So feel free to ask me anything. In order to get there, you must be free to ask whatever you want. So please, I guess somebody should be having a microphone there. Or? By the way, during the interviews, when we complete the case, we have some 3, 4, 5 minutes. I usually leave them and I say, do you have a question? So,
thank you so much for the session. I would like to ask if there is a golden framework or something that most consulting firms that use.
To solve the case?
Yes.
Okay. So, my advice. Start from some of these books, okay? You will see there are like 7, 8, 9 typical types of cases, okay? And make sure you write them down on paper, like these frameworks, that you kind of jot them down. And then exercise, try to apply them. And you will see that there are like 5, 6 cases in which they don't work. you're not answering the question, you're not pinpointing it. So my advice, try to make some sort of a flexible hybrid solution for yourself. What I did when I was preparing a case, I said, okay, I definitely need to look at performance itself, company. I definitely need to cover if the company has capabilities to do it. I definitely need to understand if the macro environment is good or how is it impacting. I definitely need to understand competitors. I definitely need to make a recommendation out of all of this. And I definitely should address some risks connected to my recommendation. And I should definitely be thinking about what some out-of-the-box solution and what are some like sensitivity analysis for you to test if my solution is good. So thinking about these big categories will help you develop your golden framework. I had like friends from Carney who haven't done anything like me in terms of that framework, but it worked for me. So this is my advice. Have in mind key categories that you should cover.
I have a question.
Yes?
So thank you so much for this informative session. So as for the calculations, what if I get the calculation wrong?
Okay. It's not like going through a red light, okay? It's not that you miss a calculation and that eliminates you from the interview. No. Make sure when you go to the calculations, when you set your framework, to be composed, okay? You need to be calm. There's nowhere to hurry. Take your time, okay? And usually if you miss, I will ask you, are you sure? And that's when you should be saying, okay, don't just give me the final result. Say, okay, in order to make this calculation, I multiplied A with B and deducted C from that. And you take me number A times number gives me this value, minus this value, gives me the final value, and that's how I come to the recommendation. That way, I can know that you maybe omitted and made a mistake within calculus, which is not a huge deal. Of course, you should be precise, understand the rough categories. And for example, if you're having very heavy calculations, 80.4 times 70.2, feel free to ask to round up, okay? You can go with precise numbers, but if you really find genuinely needing, ask to round up and make it more simple. Anyone else?
Hello, thank you for the session. Just want to ask, what stands currently among the other consulting firms as an added value for us as a fresh grads?
Okay, I've been asked this question a number of times. So, okay, I'll start from the historic aspect of Carney. Carney, unlike some other firms, has more of an engineering DNA. And our founder was engineer by background in the initial company setup. So what you can expect is to be spending more time in implementation. So you make recommendations, you bring presentation to the client, but that's not where the show stops. In Carney, we truly know that you can go to the next step and deliver the impact for the client. Usually, for example, what I've done. One company, one glass producer bought another one, okay? And we had to make a proposal, develop the case on how to merge them together. So two production sites, different portfolios, different markets, how to make this fit together, okay? And I've been like, we made a presentation about it, 4 months work, clear recommendations, and there are like 5 clear things that should happen in your company to get there. What happened? I was somebody can mute? No. I was tasked to do PMO, project management, okay? After this, we went to implementation, so I was sitting on top of all of the directors of different sectors, making sure that they deliver on these 5 things. 5 things means it needs to be done through 50 initiatives, and we would have like a weekly meeting Where do you stand with this initiative? Who is doing that? What is the problem? Is there some analysis to be done to speed it up? Is there a way to reorganize your efforts to make sure this is delivered? What happened? We merged two entities in 6 months and clicked refresh on the sales figure and saw if this, what we have done, delivers the result. Very often in Carney, we also see projects based on success fee. If we make this happen, we get paid more, okay? So it's more implementation DNA in our hearts, so not only proposing solution, but delivering it too. Anything else? One of the advices was don't be shy, so don't use your opportunity if you really have a genuine question of interest for you. If something is not clear, I think the lady over there.
You talked about that we don't have to be strict with the frameworks that we should like put our own creativity in the framework system. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Okay. So imagine you have a profitability case, okay? You have a certain company having troubles with its profitability performance, and this is where you would follow a framework usually. This is like, okay, I will look at my revenues, I will look at my costs, I will look at the subcategories of revenues, maybe by geographies, I will look at the type of costs, fixed, variable, what goes in fixed, what goes in variables. I'll try to pinpoint where the problem is and what I should solve for. This situation is where the framework works very well, okay? But imagine you get a case, we are opening up a new Carney office, and how big it should be. Now, you need to understand market sizing cases, for example, how big the market is. And there are frameworks to do so. But you should also be understanding of like, what are some key categories that I should take into account. For example, how many employees? How often do they spend time? We have consultants, but we also have support services like finance, staffing, HR. How often do they have to come to the office? Where the office is located? Things like this. So this comes a bit within the framework, a bit outside. So that's why when you do like 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 cases, you will understand, okay, usually cases try to benchmark something against the competition. So maybe I should, in my flexible framework, have a category with dotted lines saying, make sure you benchmark something. Or maybe when delivering a recommendation, it's not stated within the framework, but I should definitely say, okay, what are the risks connected with my recommendation? Or what are some macro environment trends, big trends that are impacting my solution? So this is what I think like by being flexible. Don't have like a free structure, everything and anything. Know the type of cases, know what type of framework to kind of apply, but try to have a Swiss knife, like a tool, 1, 2, 3 more that you can readily kick in if you get something out of the ordinary. Anyone else? Okay, let me just share with you the links to our cooperative training program as well as a WAD program, and please make sure that you do scan those. I'll give you a minute to do so. And you would say here, shukran jazilan, right? Yeah, thank you.
السلام عليكم جميعا، أحب أبارككم ترشحتوا آخر يوم المسابقة. كلكم أنا رجل عملي بشركة كونسلتاثون. واحد برنامج التطبيق التعاوني، الثاني الرواد بروجرام اللي هو فريش جراجويت. راح أكون إن شاء الله موجودة طول اليوم، بصير في هذا ريكوست إن شاء الله. Good luck.
بما اني طالب هندسه صناعيه واجد فكره التحدي لانه في مجال الاستشارات.
كان تحدي اليوم الاول هو توسيع قطاع صناعه الافلام في المملكه العربيه السعوديه. بنينا استراتيجيه على المدى البعيد تحديدا 2030.
واجهنا العديد من التحديات من ابرزها عامل الوقت ومستوى المنافسين، لكن بفضل الله واجهناها انا والتيم اللي معي.
يعطيهم العافيه المنتز ما قصروا في توجيهنا انا وزملائي لحل الكيس، ويا رب لك الحمد ربي اكرمنا وصلنا اليوم الثاني.
مبسوطين اننا مشاركين في المسابقه، واحنا مو من جامعه الملك سعود، لان المسابقه تجمع كل الطلاب من مختلف انحاء المملكه.
ومن ايجابيات هذا التحدي اني تعرفت على ناس جديده معي في الفريق.
وفي اليوم الثاني للتحدي لازلنا نبحث عن حلول للكيس، ونامل ان شاء الله نحن نترشح لليوم الثالث ويكون الفوز من نصيبنا.
سعيدين بالمشاركه في تحدي أهل كونسلتاثون في النسخه الثانيه، ممتنه لكل من ساهم في هذا التحدي لاتاحه هذه الفرصه.
بما اني طالب هندسه صناعيه واعجبت فكره التحدي لانه في مجال للاستشارات.
كان تحدي اليوم الأول هو توسيع قطاع صناعة الأفلام في المملكة العربية السعودية. بنينا استراتيجية على المدى البعيد تحديداً 2030.
واجهنا العديد من التحديات من أبرزها عامل الوقت ومستوى المنافسين، لكن بفضل الله واجهناها أنا والتيم اللي معي.
يعطيهم العافية المنترز ما قصروا في توجيهنا أنا وزملائي لحل الكيس، ويا رب لك الحمد ربي أكرمنا وصلنا اليوم الثاني.
مبسوطين إننا مشاركين في المسابقة وإحنا مو من جامعة الملك سعود، لأن المسابقة تجمع كل الطلاب من مختلف أنحاء المملكة.
ومن ايجابيات هذا التحدي اني تعرفت على ناس جديده معي في الفريق.
وفي اليوم الثاني للتحدي لازلنا نبحث عن حلول للكيس، ونأمل إن شاء الله نحن نترشح لليوم الثالث ويكون الفوز من نصيبنا.
سعيدين بالمشاركة في تحدي أهل كونسلتاثون في النسخة الثانية، ممتنة لكل من ساهم في هذا التحدي لإتاحة هذه الفرصة.
بما اني طالب هندسه صناعيه واعجبت فكره التحدي لانه في مجال للاستشارات.
كان تحدي اليوم الأول هو توسيع قطاع صناعة الأفلام في المملكة العربية السعودية. بنينا استراتيجية على المدى البعيد تحديداً 2030.
واجهنا العديد من التحديات من أبرزها عامل الوقت ومستوى المنافسين، لكن بفضل الله واجهناها أنا والتيم اللي معي.
يعطيهم العافية المنترز ما قصروا في توجيهنا أنا وزملائي لحل الكيس، ويا رب لك الحمد ربي أكرمنا وصلنا اليوم الثاني.
مبسوطين إننا مشاركين في المسابقة وإحنا مو من جامعة الملك سعود، لأن المسابقة تجمع كل الطلاب من مختلف أنحاء المملكة.
ومن ايجابيات هذا التحدي اني تعرفت على ناس جديده معي في الفريق.
وفي اليوم الثاني للتحدي لازلنا نبحث عن حلول للكيس، ونأمل إن شاء الله نحن نترشح لليوم الثالث ويكون الفوز من نصيبنا.
سعيدين بالمشاركة في تحدي أهل كونسلتاثون في النسخة الثانية، ممتنة لكل من ساهم في هذا التحدي لإتاحة هذه الفرصة.